As I said at the top of the show, there are a number of bills in the North Carolina House and the Senate focused on student testing, and we're fortunate to have two House legislators here with us today who are going to talk about it. We have Representative Ashton Clemmons. She's a Democrat representing District 57 out of Guilford County. And next to her is Representative Jeffery Elmore. Representative Elmore is District 94, Alexander and Wilkes County out in the western part of the state. So welcome to Education Matters, both of you. First time, I think. So,
Thank you.
I want to just to give a little background. I mentioned that you're both classroom teachers. Representative Elmore, you were just reelected to your fourth term. You are a North Carolina teaching fellow at Appalachian State University, and you taught art, I believe.
I teach art.
You teach art. You currently teach art. I should also mention that you were served as president of the Professional Educators of North Carolina for a time. So, and currently chair the House K-12 Education Committee. Representative Clemmons, you sit on that committee with Representative Elmore. Also a teacher, also a teaching fellow.
Right.
So this is kind of cool for us to have both of you on. You were a classroom teacher in Durham and Guilford counties, and then went on to serve as a principal and an assistant superintendent in Thomasville. So get the bios out of the way.
Thank you.
Let's talk about first House Bill 377. I'm going to start with you, Representative Elmore, because you were sort of the primary sponsor, introduced this bill.
Yes.
We've been talking about reducing testing for a few years. I mean, it seems to be one of those things we've kind of saw. It was all about accountability. You know, it was like, what are, I think all well-intentioned. What are our students learning and how can we measure it? But now there's been a lot of pushback, started with parents in a lot of ways, and then teachers. What's your bill, House Bill 377, sort of what does it want to do?
Well, I think even from a teacher or parent, they understand that there is a certain place or role for testing. But I believe what has happened with our testing system, it seems like we continually add and add and add, but you never take away. What this bill will do will align us better with the minimal federal requirement for a standardized test. So it's using the test in a streamlined way, in a more effective manner, which I think will benefit kids, parents, everything.
Right. Now, you mentioned, and parents who watch our show, they're familiar with end-of-grade tests.
Yes.
I mean, this bill actually goes, not only does it replace some tests, and maybe we can talk about it also with Representative Clemmons, because you're familiar with these sort of the concept of check-ins and sort of those ongoing things. But you're talking about basically eliminating end-of-grade tests.
Yes. At the elementary level, this would be an elimination of the end-of-year EOG. Which basically, in my opinion, turns into a test of endurance. Primarily in my role, I conduct testing with small groups, kids with modifications. I've had small groups where the child will start at 8:30 in the morning and they cannot complete the test, or they don't complete the test until the end of the school day. At that point, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, really what are you getting from the child with their actual competency with the testing? At that point, they're just trying to survive. This new format would use what are called the NC check-ins, which has been piloted across the state in an effective way. So you would have 3 shorter tests throughout the year, and then those tests would be averaged in a particular way to determine the growth of the student. All
right. Representative Clemmons, you're also a classroom teacher. This bill has passed out of committee, right? And so but hasn't been voted on the floor. I believe you backed this bill in the committee. Tell me about your experience with testing and why you think that something like this is a good idea.
Yes, I think that this bill is a step in the right direction. We know, just as Representative Elmore said, kids are spending way too much of their instructional time testing. And when you have 8-year-olds sitting for 4 hours one day, is that an accurate measure of their overall achievement in a year? And I think that we are joined in believing that that is not the best way to measure what our schools are doing on a daily basis. And we talked in committee about the North Carolina check-ins and how I believe there's the way that they look right now. I think that this bill kind of puts forth how we would like them to look, and that there will be some work needing to be done with DPI so that we can use a similar format that is shorter tests throughout the year to understand how kids are achieving, which more aligns with how we know assessment should be used.
And this is really trying to reach that balance that you were just talking about, Representative Elmore, which is we have to know. You got to test somehow, but it doesn't have to be a 5-hour, filling out bubbles.
That's correct. And the bill also addresses the local assessments. What we found when we actually got reporting back from the systems on the amount of local assessments that are given to supposedly aid in the EOGs, et cetera, some of your lowest performing systems tested the most hours. There's one system that if you were in the 8th grade, you had over 33 hours of just local assessments, not counting anything that was pushed down from the state.
Right.
So,
And one thing I know from my own daughter, when she was in high school, one thing that struck me was there's the testing time that she's in, but then the teachers who have to go proctor in other classrooms, and so what you end up with is a lot of dead time for students sort of watching videos or hanging out because they don't have a teacher for that period.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about the school performance grades. There are two different bills, House Bill 266 and 354, that were in committee, and it was around, and I mentioned at the top, it's not just the test, but how these tests are used. Those test scores are what are driving these A to F school grades, and I think people who watch the show know that the organization that I lead, we've been pretty critical of what we think are, the sort of a skewed view of whether a school was doing a good job. Representative Clemmons, what are your thoughts on A to F school grades and these ideas of changing the weighting, sort of changing, maybe splitting them in half? What do you think about that?
I think you are making a point. Part of that, these two issues are interrelated. Part of why we have our lowest performing schools testing so much is because they're so afraid of what's going to happen and the way that they'll be penalized based on these school grades that boil everything they do down into one grade. And so I think that these are interrelated. I think there were several proposed bills that passed our committee that are different ways to think differently about how we're holding schools accountable and what we put forth as what we value. So 266 in particular was one that I was on. Representative Rydell was the lead sponsor, and that bill has grades for growth and proficiency.
Right, so that's the one that splits, and so it gives you 2 grades, and it's the other bill that does the changes from the 80-20 to 50-50.
Yeah, so both of them are trying to give more value to school growth that's happening, and they're just presenting that information in different ways. I think that the 2 grades gives us deeper analysis into what's happening at a school, because we might have a really high performing school, so they're going to be proficient, but are they growing kids? Same for a school that's starting well below the proficiency benchmark. They may not get to the proficiency, but might have tremendous growth. Both of those schools can do great things, but the measurement should look different.
What are the so what's next for these? And I always got to ask the question. We have House legislators and Senate legislators on. Y'all are not always on the same page.
Sure.
A lot of things come out of the House that seem to have a lot of bipartisan support. And look, candidly, they go and die in the Senate. Where have you talked about to your colleagues in the Senate?
Well, I think that they understand there's a concern. The A through F system, the benefit of it is trying to put in a simplistic way to the parent, because things that have been done in the past is a school of distinction with growth and a gold star. People really didn't understand what that meant. An A through F system does simplify it to make it easier to understand, but what is in that A to F? And I think that they understand that there is a concern, and how are we actually, are we showing an accurate picture of what's going on in the schools? So I think there is some will there. I'm always hopeful with these things.
Let me ask you both, as sort of wrapping up a sort of separate topic. You were both North Carolina Teaching Fellows. Yes. There is a new version of the Teaching Fellows program that's back. 5 schools in it right now. When you were both in it, there were a lot more schools. So what are your thoughts on possible expansion of that program?
Well, Representative Gill, I'm on a bill with her that opens up more of our university systems to being open to teaching fellows. We both know that we cannot get good people in the classroom, that many of our classrooms are going unfilled as the years start. And so teaching fellows certainly is a way to address that need. There are other ways we need to look at as well, but I hope that we will continue to expand and expand in ways that diversifies our teaching force.
Great. Well, look, we are out of time, but I appreciate you both for coming on. We look forward to. So we're going to definitely follow these testing bills for sure and see what happens. So thanks very much for being
here.
here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Pete.
All right. After a brief commercial break, we'll be back to continue our series of state superintendent candidate interviews with Democrat James Barrett, a member of the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools Board. But before we go to break, see if you can answer this question about teaching fellows. When the original North Carolina Teaching Fellows program was eliminated by the General Assembly in 2011, it provided 4-year scholarships on 17 college campuses. How many colleges are currently part of the new Teaching Fellows program?
Education Matters is brought to you each week in part by Paragon Bank, serving others, enriching lives.